Emotionally guiding someone in a sales conversation. What does that mean? It means that it depends on your personality. But for me, it was quite difficult to get into the emotions of a prospect around a certain problem that he has. And this can be very helpful in B2C, but even in B2B, this can be quite helpful if you learn how to do it right. Because think about it, what is really the goal of sales? The goal of sales is to move someone from a certain problem that someone has, or at the very least a situation that can be improved, to a better situation. Which means, I think this is what Cole Gordon says, sales is really the art of finding the connection between the two and how the prospect can move from problem or situation that's not ideal to a situation that's better. You are the missing link. So that means often you'll have to be able to talk about the situation of the prospect, the psychology that he's thinking about things. That doesn't mean always, like sometimes it's better to talk about the facts, but when you can, it's very powerful to move into the emotional side of things, because emotion is a very big buying trigger, you know, and I don't mean that in a way that to abuse that. I mean that if your solution, you know, it could be a perfect logical solution for your prospect. You know, the art of it is to convey that, you know, because you might understand it, but that doesn't mean a prospect understands it, right? So you convey that by conveying that you're an expert, that you're knowing what you're talking about, that you understand the problems, and that you actually have a logical solution for that. That's how you convey that to the other person. But that's just a logical way of conveying that. Now, maybe he might agree with you at that point that he actually has a problem or that his situation could be improved by your solution. Maybe he would even also agree that the investment is worth it. He could logically agree on that. But the thing is, humans are emotional beings. And especially like in sales, if you want to get someone to buy something, then they need to be emotionally convinced as well. They need to be emotionally convinced that this is the right choice for them. Because they might logically agree, you know, your solution is good. But if they don't feel that it's actually going to help them, or if they feel that it's going to be too dangerous, or they don't trust it, or they fear that they're going to go back in some of the mistakes that they made in the past. And if you don't address those emotions, if you don't make him trust you, if you don't make him feel good, you know, there's always some risk, but you need to make him feel like a little bit security, safety, and in NLP, they say, I think Ross Jeffries used to say, you're not selling a product, you're selling decisions and good feelings about decisions. And I think that's a very powerful statement, because that's really addresses like the emotional side of needing to convey someone. So that's why you need the emotional side to it. But how do you actually go about it? You know, that's why a lot of people say that sales is like, if you're working with someone, if you have a meeting, a consultation with someone, sometimes it can be a little bit like you're actually like sort of like a therapist for them in a way, right? Because the more you can get him to trust you, and the more you can get him to open up about his situation and the things that he is experiencing, the more you can navigate that situation together to understand what's blocking him from moving forward. Or that's not a good way that I phrase it, but to understand what's really keeping him back. So for example, I talked to someone the other day, and I'm going to share some things, but I'm not going to share anything about this person. But he talked about his situation with me, and for me, for the first time on a sales call, this was like, well, this is actually where someone is like being quite honest, and it's quite like a serious bad situation. And so he was talking about that he was actually feeling a little bit stuck in his life, and that he is sometimes being depressed and he's stuck, and like his job or his profession is like really keeping him from going somewhere, from really making his business better, because he's not even necessarily wants to be like a multimillionaire, but he is someone that really wanted to be with his family. So he actually wanted the luxury of being able to do that. But in order to be able to do that, he needed the investment for that. So he needed to make more money so that he can have more time to spend with his family. And so he was talking about that and how he was experiencing, feelings and around that situation. And so I was able to navigate that with him logically at first, so that I understood like, well, what's actually holding him back and how can we actually solve this in like a structured way. That's one thing that you really need. You really need to be able to solve the problem. And that's, I think, more like a coach than a therapist. But then also you need the therapist side, because you need to ask your prospect questions. You need to ask your prospect questions about what his experience is, what his feelings is, and what he thinks is keeping him stuck. Because those are going to be the best answers, sometimes logically, but especially from like an emotional perspective. He's gonna know that much better than you do, all right? So then you can navigate that with him and think of an actual solution. One mistake I often make in that is that it's very important to show empathy while you are listening to someone's problems. And I try to do that. I think sometimes I succeed in that, but not always. Sometimes I get stuck a little bit too much in trying to solve the problem or trying to move the interaction even forward. So I think I'm always trying to be helpful, but I don't always have enough empathy to back it up, to make it feel safe for the other person. And so that's really, really important, to have a lot of empathy while you're guiding someone through his situation, especially if it's a difficult emotional situation. So that's really a skill you need to develop as a salesperson. So you really need to learn to develop empathy, and also of guiding someone through his problems, not by trying to say, well, you need to do it like this. Yes, you need to be able to think about a solution, but it's more by asking questions. It's more by being like a therapist, that you can guide him to his ideal solution. And that's quite powerful, because in this process, there will be emotions that he experiences, right? When he thinks about his situation, when he feels bad that he's stuck. And this is often like the catalyst that someone needs to take the step in the right direction. So that's why it's really powerful. Now, be aware, because a lot of salespeople abuse this. They don't do it, most of them don't do it consciously, it's just because they want to make the deal. But you want to be aware that while this is very powerful, you always want to think about what's best for the other person, not for you. Because that's the way, by thinking about the other person, that's the way not just the other person is going to move forward, but it's also the way you're going to make progress. Because I think there is a certain quote, but I forgot it. But basically, the more you can help the other person, the more benefits you're going to experience as well. So that's really the mindset you should have. And that's really what I wanted to talk about with you. I wanted to share with you today. So let me know if you have any comments, ideas, or questions. I'd love to hear from you. I will promise to answer. And yeah, hope you have a nice day. Cheers.